Good morning again and welcome to Duke in Dialogue with Sue Gordon. Since this is really our last time together, I just want to one more time say thank you to my incredible team. Okay, well, let me say their names. Okay, so Jen Chambers, Joe Supernage, Sharon Elliott, Chayla Battle, Mark, everybody who's here, Madeline, everybody who has just worked so hard for this weekend. They are extraordinary, and thank you again for giving them another huge round of applause. As many of you may know, since 2014, we decided, well, Jen Chambers told us, but we supported her, that we were going to have new alumni speakers every single Women's Weekend. And we literally received hundreds of nominations from campus colleagues, from our great steering committee members. Steering committee members, raise your hands. Awesome, yes. And from you. And we really take those and we appreciate it. And there is an opportunity, you had that question, in your brochure, on the inside front cover, you can see that there's an opportunity to nominate people. And if they've spoken before, we will let you know. So why do we do this? So we do this, one, it's a great way to engage so many more alumni. We get to hear new perspectives, and we also get to recognize the extraordinary talent in our alumni body. So why am I telling you that? Well, because we kind of broke that rule already, kind of. Well, when an alumna has a new position or role or responsibility, we feel like we can consider bringing them back. So in 2016, Sue was a panelist at Women's Weekend 2016 on a panel of Brilliant Failure and Joyous Mistake. And her name was the most mentioned in the surveys, the post-event surveys. And it left a lasting impression on so many. How many of you here were that, right? Incredible, okay. So of course her full bio is in the program and you have a chance to read about her and all her many accomplishments. But I'll just point out that in recent months she made national news as she stepped down from her role as the Principal Deputy Director of National Intelligence, the nation's highest ranking career intelligence officer. And I'm really excited to announce that last Monday, she was announced as the next Rubenstein Fellow. So we get to see her all the time. And a Rubenstein Fellow is a university-wide initiative to bring top thought leaders to Duke to share insight and spark discussion on current and future global challenges. Rubenstein Fellows work across the university, teaching classes, mentoring students, collaborating with faculty, and serving as advisors to signature university programs. And Sue will work with the Sanford and Fuqua schools, as well as Professor Peter Fever with his program on American Grand Strategies. And so on a personal note, and you're going to find this out if you haven't heard from her, she's inspirational, she's smart, she's loyal, she's fun, she's a Dookie, right? And equally as awesome Dookie as Pat Baker-Simon, her interviewer. Who is class of '86 and her DC fans, lined up right there. All right, so enjoy, it's gonna be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Sterling. It is absolutely an honor to be here on the stage today with you, Sue.
Okay.
I don't know how I got this honor other than working at NGA, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, where you were deputy director. And let me tell you, if you think she's awesome and inspirational as a speaker, have her as a boss. A boss, and I'll just tell you my anecdote before we get started. So I'm sitting in the atrium, which is kind of like the common area in cafeteria space at NGA, with a colleague. Past lunchtime, we were just talking, and Sue's strolling through, probably coming from a meeting from somewhere else, and she stops at the table. She says, "Hey, do you mind if I sit down and talk to you guys? So what do you say to the deputy director of the agency?" Yeah, no, not right now. Of course, Sue, you can sit down. And immediately she began to talk about, so what can I be doing to make this better? How's your experience here? Now, how many of you have worked in places where you've had senior leadership say, hey, I'm very interested in the people? But okay, but I'm going to ask a different question. How many of you have worked in an organization where they actually meant it? See, yeah, so I might get more hands for the first question. How many have actually heard it? And how many have actually experienced it? So when you work for Sue Gordon, you will experience it. And that is what differentiates her as a leader. So I know that you have her bio, and it's impressive. So, and because I'm getting up there in age, I have some cards. Captain of the Duke basketball team for multiple seasons.
Go Devils.
Yes.
Go Devils.
Magna cum laude from someone who is, thank you, Lordy.
Okay, that was funny.
Yeah, exactly. CIA,
Yep,
NGA,
yep.
Principal Deputy Director of National Intelligence.
Worst acronym in the universe.
Yes, and current on the Board of Directors for Palace Advisors, still doing some intelligence advising.
Yeah, finding my way.
What's not in your bio is that this year, Sue was one of InStyle's Badass 50 of 2020. Women who are changing the world. And so I'm at an age too when I say, you know, the Badass 50, I feel like those of you who are old enough to remember Isaac Hayes and his rendition of, you know, the theme to Shaft.
Yeah.
She's a bad, shut your mouth. Well, I'm talking about Sue. Well, we can dig it. You are a woman who's changing the world. And as I just mentioned, you know, she's got a host of awards. And as I just mentioned, I think what's most important, and hopefully that will resonate as she gives her sage advice to you, is that she is indeed one of the best bosses to work for. And we want to share that. So in your program, we are going to be discussing personal and professional paths and the choices that you made in both. So I want to frame this conversation and dialogue around choices.
Okay,
And of course, around
bring it.
being a woman. When you started off in a male-dominated field, so the choice, how did you end up in the intelligence community, Sue? Why?
Like almost all the good things that happen in our life, a good dose of luck and just a little bit of wisdom. I couldn't decide whether I wanted to get my PhD or go to law school. And I thought, well, you know, it's great to have an undergraduate education that teaches you how to think, but when you go to the next step, you ought to have a little bit more focus than that. And I really couldn't figure out, and so I thought I'd get a job. My dad was a career naval officer. His best friend was Stan Turner, who, neatly enough, in the 1979 was the director of the Central Intelligence Agency. And I thought, well, that's cool. The CIA, that could be awesome. And neatly enough, they were interviewing on campus. And so I went and interviewed, and it turned out well, and I was hired. So I have a BS in zoology. I was hired by the CIA. Settle down. Okay, can I digress for a second? I said this to Pat. You know, these little name tags we're wearing, it's a little bit like Facebook. Like when you see all the letters and numbers on people's name tags, mine says Sue Gordon BS 80. Like my children didn't even choose to come here. I don't even know the parent things afterwards. Anyway, so I was hired by the CIA to do analysis of Soviet biological weapons and warfare, and so that makes sense, right? Analysis of critters. I had a BS degree. You guys are awesome, and I'm going to have to get on my game. But that's how I started.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. So in terms of making that choice, what sacrifices did you have to make in entering into this field that is A, clandestine, and B, dominated in a male-dominated environment?
Man, I don't think I've ever been asked that question. Sacrifices at that point in your career when you're first starting is an interesting question. But I think three. The first is not being able to talk about what you do is really hard. And not knowing what you can say about it, because now we talk about intelligence issues all the time publicly, I do, but in 1980, for a 21-year-old to be in what was a much more closed community, I didn't know how to talk about it at all, and that's a lot of weight to carry because you don't even know if you can go home and talk about it at home. So I think that was the first one. The second is I was married. I was married to a fellow Dookie, and did we almost get divorced over this? No. But I would come home at the end of the day. He didn't work for the intelligence community, and he ended up working for the CIA because of the story I'm about to tell you. So I would come home at the end of the day. He would say, "How'd it go?" And I'd say, "I can't tell you." And so he's a smart guy. He's a Dookie, and so he ultimately stopped asking the question. And so I said, "You don't care about me." So ultimately, I really do believe that he joined the CIA just so we could talk. And for the next 30, and then the funny thing is, for the next 35 years, we never talked about work. Anyway, so that was good. And then the third is, ultimately, he wanted to be a doctor when he was at Duke. No one told him he was supposed to get good grades. So that's his story. And so we were a young married couple. He couldn't get into medical school, and so he decided that he needed to go do something. But he had the dual really impressive degrees of zoology and anthropology, and it's shocking that he couldn't get a job. So he decided to come back and go to Duke. And so here we were. I was a federal employee making $13,000 a year. My husband decided to come back to Duke University. For the first semester, we sold a car. For the second semester, we turned over all our savings. And for the third and fourth semester of his degree, I worked 3 jobs. I worked my day job. Then at night, I was a security escort. And then on the weekends, I worked at a Nautilus Fitness Center to be able to do it. So I think it's hard to think of them as sacrifices because it just turned out so great. But there are choices you have to make in life about what you want and the consequence that you'll bear to have what you want. You don't get both, right? You don't get what you want and the consequences. It just doesn't work that way.
Exactly. So to piggyback on what you're saying today, it's interesting to me because we live so much with our cell phones. They're an extension of who we are, that when I tell people I can't access my phone during the day, people are like, what? What does that mean? And for a while, because maybe this is why my husband and I work at NGA. Maybe I followed him.
No, seriously, right?
Because he couldn't talk and I needed to follow up on him. But for the longest time, our children would say, "Your dad's a spy, isn't he?" No, really, he's not. Really, he's not. So in talking about, like you said, sacrifices and consequences, you speak so eloquently about ramping on and ramping off, or opting in and out. And I know today that is a big concern, particularly for women as we continue to advance. Can you just share with everyone your story of how you ramped off and ramped back on?
Sure, and for those of you who have heard this before, I'll try not to lie. So I had the greatest first 20 years in a career ever. I loved what I did. I married a saint, so I was able to both do work and have a family that was well taken care of, and so that was all pretty good. I advanced pretty quickly. The CIA was a place that actually judges you more on your performance than your pedigree. And so that was an awesome place for me to work. I would cheat time to do well. So I pretty much would work 2 days for every day. I'd work all day, then I would come home at night to meet my children after school, do their homework with them, do their sports with them, read them a book, snuggle, sing them a song, put them in bed, and then I'd go back into the office at 10 o'clock at night and work from like 10 to 2 to get more work done. Then I'd come back home and I'd be up to put them on the school bus. So I was cheating, I know, dumb. I wish I'd had a boss that, no, seriously. It worked, but up until a point. So the day came where it didn't work. My children were now 13 and 9, and I was out doing a work meeting, and my daughter, my 9-year-old, called me and said that my son had run away. And he didn't go far. J-Man will never go far, but it was a pretty good wake-up call for me, and I'm like, oh my gosh. I walked in the next day after that, and I gave my 2 weeks notice because it became clear to me that I couldn't both be the mom I wanted to be and the employee I wanted to be. And I chose the one I did. And then I was gone for 7 years to finish raising my children and came back. That moment of choice was so easy. Right? It was so clear to me what I needed to do. And part of knowing what you need to do is knowing who you are. So other people could have made a different choice. They could have chosen to take less stressful jobs. They could have chosen to work part-time. That isn't me. I'm an in or out gal. If I had worked part-time, I would have gotten half pay for full-time work. Right? If I had been doing a job that wasn't important, I would begrudge every minute because for me, I never begrudged the time away because I was valuable. So just, you have to know who you are when you make a choice. So it wasn't hard to make the choice. That doesn't mean it wasn't scary. Because I was afraid I was cool because of the work I did. And I was afraid I wouldn't be who I was if I wasn't doing that. Now, neatly enough, for anyone who have never made that choice, it turns out you're exactly who you are all the time. So you need not be afraid, but at that time I was. And then when I came back in as less pay, less position, and no one remembered how incredibly important I had been. So I had to build a reputation all again. So you make the I just say you make the choices. Like happiness, I really do think comes with the ability to make choice. But you also must understand that you don't get choice and. Right? You don't get choice and I'm not going to lose half of my family's income in one day. Not choice and, right? So a lot of people say, well, how did you on-ramp back? And one of the reasons was I was good when I left, but more than that, I hadn't pissed off the organization when I left. I didn't ask them to give me something they couldn't give. They were very willing to allow my choice. And so this notion of choice is really powerful, really fundamental to happiness, but it doesn't mean that there's not a consequence that you are going to endure for that choice. And so when you're deciding whether to choose, one of the things you have to do is, are you relatively happier here, or will you be relatively happier there? But don't think there's not going to be a consequence. And that'll play out later in my life, right? Because ultimately that's what happened with the president, is making a choice.
Well, she's been reading my questions.
You didn't tell them about how awful it is to have me as a boss.
Well, right, yeah, no.
You didn't tell them that part.
So just to give you all the inside joke on that, beforehand we were communicating, and I said, hey, Sue, I have some conversation starters. I said, that's really a fancy way of saying questions. And, I can share those with you. She said, questions, not, yeah, okay, whatever. So I said, okay, whatever, we're gonna roll. So funny that you mentioned the president, because in the news, just over the past days that we've been here, the intelligence community, the IC, has been in the news. Mm-hmm. And my next question was really going to be, in August, you made the choice to resign from your position as the second highest intelligence professional in the land. How did you come to that decision? Why then? And you did it so gracefully. Can I say that? I don't know if you did it so gracefully.
Okay. And in really hard decisions, no one can help. It's scary, right? In really hard decisions, you want someone to tell you what to do so very badly. And they can't. As a matter of fact, when they try to, they actually make it worse because they're taking away, inadvertently taking away some of your decision space. So the president and the intelligence community have a tenuous relationship, and and have throughout. So in the 6 months before August, Dan Coates, who was, so one thing we need to know is both Dan Coates and I were President Trump's appointees. There's a lot of confusion in the media that I was a holdover from a previous administration, and we were his appointees. And it became obvious that the president was going to remove Dan. And one of the things I wanted to know was what was my future going to be. And so I went to the White House and I talked to the staff and I said, will you consider me for the DNI? And they said no. And I said, why? And they said, because he wants someone he can trust. I said, I've taken a polygraph for 40 years. No, I didn't say that. But it would have been good, though. I just wasn't that prepossessed. But they wanted a political appointee, and that had become the norm. And I said, okay, then here's what I'll do. Statute says that the principal deputy becomes the acting director. I will be the acting director for as long as you need. And then when you have a director confirmed, I will give you a little time, but then I'm going to step down because I'm not going to be a deputy twice. I'm not going to have been in a deputy role twice. And they said, great. And from, I'm going to say January through July 20th, not that I remember the day, I was going to be the acting director of national intelligence. I'd reaffirmed that. And some things had happened where that hadn't come true for some of my colleagues at the Department of Homeland Security. Claire Grady had been the deputy, and when Kirstjen Nielsen was removed, she should have ascended, and they didn't let her. And so I said, do not do to me what you did to Claire, because that moment will impute to me, and if that's going to happen, just tell me now and we'll step aside. Well, damned if on the 28th of July, Dan is fired/resigned, and a tweet comes out that says, and I'll be announcing the acting director soon. And my phone blows up. So it became clear on the 28th July when Dan Coates resigned that I wasn't going to be the acting director of national intelligence. Small problem. Statute said that if Dan leaves and I'm in place, I must be the DNI. So now what do we do? We had a tussle then between the Office of the President and the intelligence community again. So 2 weeks, Congress, me, we're trying to fight, we're trying to convince them that I'd be okay. It became clear I wouldn't, so now what's your choice? A lot of people wanted me to go to the press, take my case to the press. A lot of people wanted me to make him fire me. A lot of people wanted to make it be a statutory battle, send it to the Supreme Court to decide whether I had to be named or not. And so that's the moment that I walked in and made the choice to resign, and here's the reason I made the choice to resign. One, I'm the third kid of a naval officer. If your boss no longer wants you, you give a cheery aye and you step aside. I was his appointee, he no longer, I mean, he's wrong, but it's,
Don't say it.
but it's his choice, right? So that's number one. Two, let's say we win the statutory battle. That's going to be awesome. I have to be there. How do you think those Oval Office sessions are going to go? I mean, it was difficult enough, but if he shunned me, that would be terrible. And then the last one is, I didn't think my community needed another fight. They hate being in the media. Remember that first question you asked me?
Yes.
Yeah. Spies hate being in the media, so I didn't. So that's ultimately why I chose to do it, is because it felt proper, it felt right for who I am, and it felt respectful of my community. And then ultimately, you know, my dad always said that sailors at change of command ceremonies say, these officers that come and go, they don't hurt the outfit much. You know, fundamentally, leaders are just stewards of position. They're not the important one. And so I'm not worried when I step down that so magically the intelligence community is going to do its job. But all that goes into it. That is not, of course, what played out in the press, which was surprising. And no one should ever go on Twitter. You can't unsee the crap that people write.
Yeah, no, you can't.
Yeah. But you got to be who you are. right? And you
Yes.
I think you have to be mindful of who you are, the team you're on, and the community you serve. And all of those considerations are playing out in that moment of choice.
Absolutely, absolutely. So when you talk about the community, the IC community, you have been called, not deemed, you are a visionary, an initiator of change. And so you have pushed the IC to do more work with public-private partnerships to utilize intelligence in the open and partner with what is secret and classified. Why is that important?
Oh, because the world keeps on turning, right? So, just newsflash to you all, the world is as different as I've ever seen it. There's a really awesome TED Talk out there. It's old now. It's a guy named Eddie Obang, who's a British organizational theorist, and this TED Talk says that sometime after midnight the world changed and we all woke up and nothing worked. And we didn't understand it because the world looked the same, but it was fundamentally different. That really is where we are right now. This is a world where every technology is available to everyone, where we are perfectly digitally connected and data is abundant, and that is changing the nature of it. And because that world has turned, intelligence has to change. Government has to change. Responsibility has to change, because in that world where our adversaries and competitors can move digitally and cross what had been geographic or physical barriers with impunity, the threat surface of free and open society is now not in governmental control, it's in the private sector control, it's in your control. And so the nature of intelligence has to change so that we provide wisdom, insight, and clarity to the people who are both being threatened and who are making decisions. And so to me, change is really about continued relevance. Like, I hate the process too, but the notion of holding fast to something that is no longer working just is anathema to me. So for intelligence, so the reason I push so hard is because I always want to be as good tomorrow as we were today, not because I think we're bad today. Does that make sense? Yeah, it's really hard to get across to a workforce. It's like, why are we changing again?
Absolutely. The second part of my question is, how do you make that happen in a slow-moving atmosphere? But you addressed that.
Yeah, well, you've worked in the government. I mean, the government is right? So the government is intentionally slow. Do y'all understand that? Like, we want, no. Okay, so there are there are problems that need to be addressed, but just philosophically, government is supposed to be slow. Because you don't want an activist government. You want it to be consistent, you want it to be transparent, you want it to be fair. When you want to change it, there's a craft to changing within a bureaucracy. And I think that's hard because the people so believe that what they're doing is important for that fairness and that mission that you're saying, no, we're going to do the same thing, we're going to just do it differently, I think is sporty. But that's the way I've always addressed it, is say, no, the mission persists, the modality changes.
Great. Within that, you've also made the choice to both advocate for and invest in people. When you talk about bureaucracy, government's here, but there are always the people. So why have you been such a voice and a force for the people, and what are the benefits?
Oh, man. Well, because, I don't know, we all know what we possess, but when your vision, I don't know, I just want more, right? I want to know everything. I want the benefits of wisdom and perspective and different opinions and disagreement. The reason I so love people is because what they individually possess is what allows us collectively to move. right? And so you have to see the individual, and then you have to find a way for the collective to have some shared quest that doesn't diminish what they each have, but does allow it all to be used. And so to me, it's just, and then I want every person to be their whole self and their true self. If I have one piece of career advice to everyone, it's don't ever work for someone who makes you small. Like, don't ever be less than you are, right? And my vision is so big, but it isn't an abstraction. And the reason I'm so hopeful is because of what I see that people have if it could just be marshaled to get there. Like, don't you just sit in front of this audience and think, we know who's out there.
Yes, absolutely.
And so that's what, to me, it's just about that. And the notion that someone is made to feel less or unimportant or spends time but is not used is both hurts me as a human, but it's anathema to me as someone who likes to move to the future.
Outstanding, outstanding. So in following that stream, you have also been one to challenge leadership to make a deliberate choice to choose diversity and inclusion. And not as a happenstance, not as a directive. And so for those of you who don't know, I used to be the diversity officer for the agency, and now I do EEO. The importance of having senior leadership behind that is immeasurable in the success of the efforts. So when you are in the position that you're in, how do you bring those of your colleagues along to make the deliberate choice of diversity and inclusion?
That's such a great question. Not universally well over the course of my career, by the way. The CIA probably 10 years ago had a class action suit brought against it by women in a particular category because there was a promotion exercise where no women were selected for promotion to senior rank despite a pool of over 200 people, half of whom were women, and no woman was selected into those positions. And so that then launched a study on why that could be true. And everyone was like, oh, this is awful, and how could this all happen? And since I was 24 years old, I've sat on career service boards. The career service boards are the promotion boards that evaluate people for promotion. Man, I did it at 24 because I was the senior most woman as a GS-10 in my organization. But I had sat on those boards that were making those choices. I sat on the board that made that choice. And I think it was that moment that I realized you have to be much more purposeful about this. That there were no bums in that room. The weirdest thing is you can get caught in a conversation where you convince yourself that you're making the right decisions and you never go back and look at it and say, oh my God, that couldn't have been true. And you did it. So I think one is recognizing in myself that while I had espoused it, while personally in my units I had advanced it, I had not done enough organizationally. And so then I decided to go back. How do you do that? I talk about it all the time. Call it out when it doesn't happen. And then my last push really came out of the Me Too movement. When the Me Too movement happened, my reaction was really organizational. Like, how did NBC not know what Matt Lauer was doing? Well, of course they did. Right? And they turned a blind eye. And so my push became, how did those women stay in that situation for so long? And I know how they did. Because they wanted to do what they were doing. And so my latest push had been, and we talked about this team, is never make anyone choose between pursuing the life they want and being treated decently as a human, and getting the men involved in that and holding that as a standard as a way. So I think the way I've done it is just make it present in my conversation, hold people accountable to it, try and raise it to a level that is about let's look in aggregate what it is we're doing and then what actions can we take. That doesn't mean that I also haven't promoted people that I later found out were not living that standard. So I think you have to both pursue it as hard as you can and recognize in yourself when you have not lived your standard, and then correct your behaviors as a leader as well. Mm-hmm. Call yourself out is, I guess, what I'm saying.
Exactly. So on a more personal note, how have you chosen to deal with those speed bumps? Failures, disappointments, perhaps not the best choice, as you just mentioned, in your career. How have you chosen to deal with that?
I'll be shorter on this answer. One, I name it. Like I think maybe this is my athletic background, maybe just competition taught you that you have to go ahead and look at the circumstance and you can't wish that it's not so, it just is. So I think step one is just admit that you're in it, admit that you're in the soup. The second is decide, right? Decide what it is you want. That is really hard for us to do. It was really hard for me to do. What is it you want? And then the third thing is, and stay in it until you can say that. Don't be reactionary. The best piece of advice I ever got in my whole career was from a boss who was firing me because I was a woman. And I said, well, if this is the case, I'm going to just leave. And he said, he said, but I'm not going to let that happen because you never want the organization to think that your performance is dependent on them. Right? So you always have to, don't be so reactionary that you react to the situation. So that's it. I hold until I understand it, and then I'll hold a little longer till I know how to decide, and then you move on. And so the way I do it is believing that I have power. I may not have had the power to stop what happened to me, but I do from that moment forward have the power to choose what I do next. And I choose to be uncomfortable until I know what to do. And we all want to be comfortable. We want pain to end. We want it to go away. We want to be better. I think the thing I do is I allow myself to be unsettled for as long as it takes to know. And then you move on. And then it was a choice. And then you're happy.
Yes.
So it's also easy.
I know. And that all happens in about 15 minutes.
Yeah,
right?
about that. About that.
So I know that there are some students here, so I want to give a shout out to the students. Why did you choose Duke, and what is the thing or things that you took from your Duke experience that have carried you through?
Oh man, I love Duke, and Duke gave me the things that are most important. There's a book, The Things I Carry With Me. Duke gave me what I carry with me. Duke gave me the love of my life. So I met my husband, I'm going to cry. I met my husband at the hands of another Duke woman because she decided I was the most pathetic woman because all I did is study and play basketball. So she set up a pickup basketball game with me and 9 of the fraternity brothers of her boyfriend. And yeah, we know how to get you out there. And they were one guy short, so his roommate, a swimmer, joined that pickup basketball game, and he was a horrible basketball player, but he asked me out that night. We dated ever since. So Duke gave me the love of my life. I can still see him walking down from Clock Tower Quad at some ungodly late afternoon hour when he was just getting up and I was finishing my 7th class or something. He was wearing, anyone in the 70s and 80s? Yeah, okay, so you're gonna understand what he was wearing because I can still remember. He's wearing a pair of baby blue cords, wallabies, and a white shirt, and it was the cutest thing. So Duke gave me the love of my life. He's like the best thing ever, and if I've been successful, it's because I happened to marry a guy that wanted for me everything I wanted for myself. Duke taught me how to think. Mm-hmm. I'm moving on so I don't cry more. And Jimmy's going to be so happy that he didn't come, isn't he? They taught me how to think. I think the reason I'm so focused on the future is I'm just curious. I wonder what if we could, where could we go, how can we get there, all that. I think that was really honed here. at Duke, especially in the 70s, there were so few requirements on what we had to take. You know, the requirements for a degree were specific, but they were a relatively small set, and so I took advantage, and I took a whole bunch of courses, and I just loved thinking. And Duke gave me my best friends. So yeah, I played basketball here, and we talked about that, and I got 3 of my teammates sitting up here. There's nothing better than teammates and old teammates who watch their sport being played later. You know, we're like, oh my God, I can't believe they're not rebounding. And so, as though we were as good as they were. But they gave me my best friends, right? And Ruthie and just so many of you. So that, and I've come back enough and talked. Gosh, the students here are so shockingly amazing, so erudite, so prepossessed, so clear-eyed, and it's exciting. You know, if people like that keep coming, we're going to be okay. Mm-hmm. People want to know why I'm optimistic because of that, and so to get to be a part of it. I know, right? I know. Best friends? Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. My best, one of my best friends, my kids grew up, they're like, these are my aunts. And they're, oh, so these are your sisters? No. It's my roommate. Yeah. My roommate's still there. Yeah. These are their aunts. Yeah. So my love, my mind, and my friends, that's a pretty good trifecta. Yes. Plus absolutely. Gorgeous Carolina days. Yeah, I know. I continue to sell the campus. Oh, you're interested in Duke? Go in the spring. Yeah. You will not find another campus. You can't convince me. Yeah. And if you do, you're lying. So a story that you don't know that I'll tell about you when you talk about the love of your life. I actually was out Christmas shopping. This is several years ago. And you and the love of your life were Christmas shopping as well. And I didn't come up to you because there was someone else who clearly was from NGA. Now, you know, we're in Macy's, there's stuff all over the counter, and Sue's approaching the counter, but somebody comes up to her and taps her like, and I saw you talking, it's like, oh, you're at NGA. And so she immediately turns to that person, again, being a great boss, and engages. And it was like clockwork. She just kind of passes the merchandise over to the hubby, and he just stepped in the line. You know? Okay, yep, I know what I have to do now because Sue's over here. But again, really just man. That commitment to people that, you know, out and you are authentic. You're not somebody inside of the building and outside of the building. That's you true. Are always Sue. And that's what, as an employee, I appreciate about you so very much. So I know that we're going to have a good time for questions, but I wanted to do something a little fun, a little free association with you. So I'm going to just drop some words and oh my God. And no, I'm good. They're good Not words. Not that I'm competitive. They're good. They're good words, and they're words that hopefully you can drop some knowledge about that will help people in terms of they're related to work. Courage. Oh. So my favorite courage is the courage of a leader. Leadership courage is so special because of what it allows, but it is different in that it's courage to allow someone to do something different from what you would do and still stand behind it. And what happens when you can show that courage is magical. That's a wonderful one. This is going better already than I expected. Accountability. You can't hold someone accountable who doesn't feel accountable. Right, so when we talk about accountability in organizations, you need, and people always say, to leaders particularly, you need to make everyone more accountable. I will tell you, the way you address it is not by holding people accountable, but by working to show them that they must be accountable. right, personally. So accountability is an interesting thing. We try and impose it on people. Accountability is actually something you have to feel for yourself first. And so when you want to change the accountability of an organization. Now you can be punitive, you can punish people, you can do that, but accountability is something that is an organizational ethos. And so the way you do it is not punitive, it's to basically get them to understand the responsibility they have. And if you do that culturally, then accountability will be an entirely different, much more positive thing that everybody believes that they should be accountable because of what they're trying to do.
Leading versus managing.
We need both. Managing is the craft of running an organization in a manner that is consistent enough to be both responsible and accessible to people. So management is an important thing. But leadership, boy, what leadership can do is leadership can set vision, it can inspire action, it can allow accomplishment. Leadership is one of the great enablers, and it is never small, and it is never selfish. And if you can manage that, leadership will take you to places you can't imagine going by yourself.
Empathy.
Everyone's fighting a great battle, right? I think we all see the world through our own lens. Most of what you see that is wrong behaviorally is because they have a different action going on than you do. And to me, empathy is imagining that everyone is fighting their own quest, and how can I understand the quest they're in such that I can understand their behaviors.
Humor.
She who laughs, laughs.
All right. All right. So it's time for us to move to questions Q&A. We have some mics.
That was fun, thanks, that was good.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah,
You
that
good.
was good, that was good.
So we have microphones in the audience, and I see a hand here in the center.
How can you see anything? It is really bright.
Yeah, I know. I need my sunglasses on, right?
Thank you both so much. As I told you both individually, you're the reason I came this weekend, and it has been an amazing weekend. So my name's Rachel Lawrence, and,
Hi, Rachel.
and again, thank you. You've touched on so many things. I've actually been thinking for months, if I had the chance to ask Sue Gordon anything, what would I ask you? And we talked about in the last panel, ask what you want. Can I have you as a boss? But seriously, it's more rhetorical. I now advise on diversity and inclusion issues. And one of the things I like to really hammer home with my clients is the need for psychological safety. And the 20 years that I spent in the intelligence community, we talked about it in terms of speaking truth to power.
Yeah.
Same concept, applies within any industry. But I would love to get your perspective on that because, the power of being able to speak your truth in the small moments and the big moments when you're in the White House, or it's just so fundamental to making change and getting the culture you want. So I'd love to get your perspective on that idea of psychological safety and how to make it a reality.
Wow, so many things in that question that we could talk about. I hate the phrase "speaking truth to power." Because it implies that truth is a choice. Now you have to be truthful, and that power doesn't want to hear it. And so I think you have to start by being true, and then you have to add to being true humility, so that you understand your truth is not the only truth. And when you want to be in an organization and effect change, have your voice heard, I think you both have to be confident enough that being true is important, so important that you would risk things for it. But you want to execute in a way that allows the possibility that you don't know everything. Right? And I think if you can do those two things, it will work out. It's a little bit like my comment about choice before, is organizations have their imperatives too. And so be strong, be true, know who you are, be confident, understand where your lines are, hold your space. You know, I would tell anyone in an organization, if you have a job, you have to hold your space. If you don't hold that space because you're afraid, the organization can't work. So it isn't an act of hubris to speak truth to power. It's actually a responsibility. You have to hold your space. But you have to understand that there's a game going on elsewhere. You want a quick story?
Yes.
Okay, I really will make it quick. Benghazi. So I was the director of security, the head of support at the CIA during Benghazi. Yeah, it was awful. Those were my men on the roof that I had essentially put there. But when that all went down, Dave Petraeus was the DCI, and he said, "You're going to have to talk to the media because things are really going around in the press." And we're like, "No, we can't talk to the press. We can't tell them anything. That would be horrible." He said, no, we're going to have to tell them what happened that night. And my people came to me and said, "Sue, you can't let them do that. It will give away our positions worldwide. It'll tell things you can't." So I went trundling in like, like Pete Longstreet to General Lee, "You can't do Pickett's charge." And I said, "We really can't do this." And they said, no, we're going to. The next morning I came in and said, "We really can't do this." They said, "We're really going to do it. We're going to talk to the media. We're calling 20 and we're going to tell them everything about it." I said, "You can't." And they said, "We are. And you're going to be there." The reason why the boss wanted to tell the story was because we were being hammered in the media. Early on, the story was that the CIA hadn't answered State Department's call. And that was their message. And we were like, "Yeah, we can take the hit. It's okay. Don't give fire oxygen." As soon as we told the story to the media, that ceased to be the storyline. There were other things that happened in Benghazi, but it did do that. So I spoke truth to power, but I was not right. Someone knew more than I did. So I would just say that psychological health and courage in an organization is you have to know who you are and be willing to play that role, but you also have to allow that there are other people playing another role, and those things intersect, and your success will be when you can make those things manage. And then when you become the boss, you have to leave more room than is there. That was a great question, Rachel.
Any other questions?
Thank you both. I also connected with my husband at a pickup basketball game, but I had to show up 10 times before I got to date. But you're a much better basketball player.
Not really. My teammates will tell you no.
Language is important in all arenas, but
Yes.
particularly in politics and government, and I think particularly today. And we're having phrases, labels, terms show up again and again, and sometimes from the fringe, and gain currency, sometimes in a newspaper like the New York Times. And the example I'll use is the, quote, so-called deep state, because this is your arena. How do we avoid letting phrases that carry so much weight and that are shorthand for really complicated conversations creep into our everyday conversations in ways that legitimize things that we really don't want to legitimize? You're an excellent communicator. What advice do you have for us?
I don't know, it's hard right now, right? I think we're living in an era of hyper-partisanship and irresponsible social media. And so everything is so hyperbolic that it's hard to have any of those conversations. I'm actually trying to figure out from where I sit now how to insert myself into this conversation that you allude to specifically, which is the notion of a deep state suggests that our institutions are malfeasant. Listen, Pat will tell you, I'm pretty critical of bureaucracies and I'm pretty
Yes.
forward-leaning, but they aren't malfeasant. And this notion of a deep state is a malfeasant institution. And if you put that notion in time, what happens in America when the world gets more chaotic and we can't believe in ourselves or our institutions? How is that going to be rebuilt? So I'm trying to figure out how I insert myself in the conversation in a manner that doesn't get me labeled on one side or the other. And I think what I'm thinking about doing is, instead of talking about what's happening right now, instead of picking on either side of the conversation that I think is wrong, I think the president is wrong to impugn the character of our institutions, even if he wants to change them. And I think the institutions are wrong to long for a simpler time and hate the notion of someone who does it differently from how they used to do it. I think both sides are wrong. But I think the way we walk into this is to talk about the thing that no one's talking about, is what's the changing condition that we need to address? Rather than the way that we're prosecuting it, get into the thing that we need to do and try and change the conversation around, away from the instant and into the imperative. But I don't know, we'll see if we do it. I think I've got an op-ed coming in a little bit, so we'll see if I do that well. Either I'm gonna, be labeled as a part of the problem, or maybe I can advance the conversation. But that's how I do it, is don't focus on the current behaviors, focus on what the issue is, and then try and figure out how we have a conversation about the issue in a manner that does not impugn either side of the argument, even though there's plenty to impugn.
Mm-hmm. You have a question?
That was a great question. I'm going to be thinking about that. I'm going to think about the answer I wish I had given tonight. That was awesome.
It's being recorded,
That was awesome.
I love that you met your husband at Duke, and I wondered if we could hear some personal advice to the topic of dating on college campuses today. And I'm wondering if you have advice that you would give other young women about what to look for in terms of qualities when you meet someone at a young age, right? Because you had big ambitions, and meeting someone at a young age was probably unexpected and early.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering what dating advice you would give.
Dating advice by Sue Gordon.
Right, it's like, I think this is a new show.
I know, this is awesome. So I think that's a great question. And I think it's a very fraught environment, in part because it was so much easier in a way, it felt like, when I went to school, because the societal norms were so much closer. We were all kind of raised the same way. We kind of believed there was a right way and a wrong way. And even though none of that was completely right, we all still kind of worked within that. And I think now we've kind of blown up societal norms because people have this notion that everyone should be able to do whatever they want. Newsflash, gang. Society is about willing sub-optimization of individual rights for the common good. Okay. So that was total aggression. So I think it was easier. I think it's harder now. Here's the way I navigated it, and it's the same thing I've said before. Know who you are. Being willing to suffer short-term consequence for that. If you find out that being who you are isn't allowing you to get what you want, be willing to consider the possibility that you don't see it quite right. And then never choose to be with someone who doesn't treat you right. You don't need anyone that bad. So that's my best.
So I'll give you advice that my daughter who is 20-something, gave me. She said, you know, I don't want a man who doesn't intend to date me. I don't want to be anyone's pastime or second choice. I need to be his intention.
Oh, I like that. You just reminded me. When my daughter was coming of age, and I was trying to give her advice on how to handle this, I said, just never be casual.
Right.
You can make choices about what you do, and different people make different choices themselves, but don't make casual choices when it comes to love. Be intentional. Same thing. That's great advice. You're so wise.
Yeah.
And in the next hour, Sue will be asking Pat questions.
Why not?
Yeah, why not?
I think we had another question, and we have one down here. Okay, we have one
Okay, I'm
right in here.
going to start answering in tweets. This is going to be great. Too soon? I don't know.
Hi. I recently started a new job where I am the only woman. Yep, right over here. Hi.
I got you.
Recently,
Direction finding.
recently started a new job. I'm the only woman leading a group of men, and I've gotten some feedback that.
Right.
Yeah, I've gotten some feedback, and a little bit of context. I just got elected as mayor of my town, and so.
Oh, wonderful. Excellent.
And so I'm the first woman to do that and the first person of color to do that. Wow. And yeah, I know. But see, people have been in the room with me
And
before.
in the third hour, we're going to bring you up.
Jen already said, like, hey, we can do like a first 100 days, like drinking out of the fire hose in 2 years, but we'll see. But I've gotten some feedback, and I actually got it this morning, that I needed to humble myself because I needed to not seem like the smartest person in the room. And, excuse my language, ladies, but there's this line in a Kendrick Lamar song that says, I can't fake humble just because your ass is insecure. And so that has been my thought this morning, but I thought, let me ask Sue Gordon, who has way more experience than I do, probably being the only woman in the room or being in that position of leadership, of how to balance that and how to navigate it in a way that's going to get everyone moving forward. Because obviously, my goal is to move my city forward.
Right.
I want to make sure that all of our citizens are reaping the benefits of what we can provide. And we're not there yet. So, yeah, I've been pushing. No, I'm not humble about it because, hey, we've got to make things happen. But your thoughts?
Yeah, so one, you've already done the first thing that I'd say is when you get feedback like that, no matter how it's delivered or no matter what the intent was, ask yourself the question whether, what was behind it and should I attend to it? And you're already doing that, right? So let's presume that they were saying something that was useful to you. And I don't know, because some people will say things like that because of their own stuff, right? But that you can slough off, right? You will miss good stuff if you ignore all the stuff that's stupid. So I don't know how to say that, but so you're doing the right thing. You're asking yourself, man, what did I just hear? What are they saying? And so I think as a leader, let's give them noble intent. What they might have been saying is, you are so impressive and you're so commanding that it is hard for us to figure out how to get in there because it's scary. Because you're so good that we walk in, even if we have an idea, we very quickly feel that your ideas are better, right? So if you want to achieve what you said you wanted to, if you want to help your town move forward, and you know that you need all the help, it is true that commanding leaders sometimes have to figure out how to make room for everything else. It is never a pure less smart. It is much more about how do I leave room for others. And then it may be that you're not the first one that talks. Maybe you ask questions. Maybe you do that. And maybe you try some of those things accepting the noble premise and see whether it changes what you get out of your team. But the stuff that's about you should be different or you're too smart or that, let that roll off you like water off a duck. But what you care about is being good. So sometime out of the mouths of babes will be good things. Like someone once described me as, she's always happy and never satisfied. Right, that sounds awesome, right? Except when you think about it. Then you're like, well, what does that mean? And you know what it meant? And they're exactly right. I am so focused on the future that I forget to celebrate the present. So I think you're already doing it, but consider that possibility that they might have meant that. Try that, leave some more room, ask more questions, speak last. And if your team says, what are you doing? We need you as a leader, then just figure that person was a loser, not that it necessarily was a
Hi, thank you so much for everything this morning. So
You're
I'm a
welcome.
senior currently.
Woohoo! Go Devils.
Yeah. Graduating as an engineer and going into the aerospace defense industry. And I think that sometimes it seems like there may be a conflict between choosing to be the best engineer, maybe creating the most innovative design, maybe in intelligence, really connecting the dots and pushing forward an important piece of advice or intelligence. There may be a direct conflict with sort of a fear or apprehension that that design or that piece of intelligence may get used in an application that goes against your personal beliefs. So I was wondering how to deal with that moral conflict, especially in an entry-level position.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Right, so that's the Google question, right? No, that's Google deciding that they didn't want to participate with the Department of Defense on an AI program because they were afraid that it would be used in autonomous warfare, and they didn't want to participate in that. So I think what I'd tell you is, for nearly 40 years, I swore to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States. That what distinguishes us is that we're a nation of laws. And that the technology doesn't create the problem. The people who use to create the technology creates the problem. So it isn't this notion that just by creating technology or holding that back, you're in the responsible position. No, the responsible position is in what governs use of things. That's what distinguishes free and open societies from others, is that piece. So that's what I'd tell you is the thing that governs bad use is not the technology. It's the laws and the ethos and the mores that go behind it. And that's what we should make sure we have right. But the technological advance has also allowed incredible advances in medicine and peace and water and so many things. So you don't want to govern technology as though the technologists are the ones that the adjudicator of rightness and wrongness. It's our nation of laws that does that.
We have one, thank you.
All right, last question. Make it good. Like the whole hopes and dreams.
Well, it's going to be. We're going to have two last questions because I was down here as well.
I'm sorry.
No,
Okay,
no, don't.
I'm gonna go with mine.
Don't apologize.
It follows on her. So, quick story. My husband played JV basketball for 2 seasons at Duke. Yeah. He just got recruited from the University of Maryland, from Harvard to the University of Maryland to run their quantum technology center. He's a physicist.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm bragging about my husband in a room full of women, but okay. So his field science, I've done public health. What could you, in your experience in the intelligence community, what would you ask for from those two communities, science and public health, to support what intelligence? Well, how could they work together?
Okay, so both of them are incredibly important. because that's where so much of the advance is going on today. In biosciences, right, and in data sciences that are powered by compute. Intelligence is completely about being able to look at what's happening and inductively generalize out of it. So I would ask two things of both those. Number one is participate with us so we have more wisdom about what we're seeing. Because intelligence, you just see activity, you don't know intent. Partner with the intelligence community to be able to understand what, particularly in those fields where there's so much dual use that is really hard to either not make someone 10 feet tall or miss something. So one's on the analysis side. The second is there are so many things in both those fields that we need to do nationally. And when I say nationally, I really mean the 76 democratic countries of the world that need to kind of band together against totalitarian regimes, that we need to do to make sure that we are not susceptible to threats, either from information or from misuse of living systems. And both those fields can help us understand how we're prepared to counteract threats. Just probably the two most important, compute and biology. It's the future.
Down here. And this will be the last question.
Okay. It's because I took so long answering each one. But you all, it was your fault. Your questions were good.
So for the last question, I have two short questions.
Nice. Break the rules. That's a woman after my own heart.
So for many jobs, but yours in particular, you had to operate under imperfect conditions with imperfect information. And so I want to know if you have any advice for leaders and future leaders for how to navigate spaces where you have to make very difficult decisions without all the information. And then my second question is, big picture strategy, what do you think is the greatest threat that we're facing now, and what makes you optimistic that we're going to overcome it?
Well, that was three. Okay, so I'm just saying, you're not fooling any of us. The key to decision making is you have to decide before you know everything. My trick is, can you bear the consequence of being wrong? Right? So it doesn't feel like a test of your will or your courage or anything. It's just when you're ready to move, look at it, say, and if I'm wrong, and if being wrong, costs a few dollars, who cares? If it costs a few lives, you probably need to go back and do more work. So to me, the art of decision making is just doing work, looking at what you're about to decide, and then ask if you can bear it. What was your second question? Because I'm ready for the third one. Biggest threat, I think, that we're facing, well, this is the world where the threats are to and through information in general. And so those technologies that are around that are really important. Trust and truth are the most fundamental aspects of open societies. And so we need to really address those technologically. The greatest threat to America is that we'll stop believing in ourselves. Right? And there are this is a world that is so changing that open societies are kind of vibrating and bucking and messy and all that. At the exact same time, there are other theories of government that are appearing to be a competitor to open democratic systems because they're neater. And if we stop believing, which is why I think attacking our institutions is so deleterious, because it's why election interference is so bad. Believing in ourselves is the most important thing. And then why am I optimistic? Oh my gosh, because we've been here before. Because I know who we are, because I've seen unimaginable things done. And if you strip away all the noise to the question about all the hyperpartisanship and you look at what is really challenging us, well, we know how to take on really hard problems. And when I meet the people that are institutions, when I hear students talk, we'll solve all of them because we must. And so I'm desperately optimistic about that.
Thank you.
Stop it. Nice. Nice, John.